The crystal city shone like a star on the alien world. Its towers were tall and sharp, their surfaces catching the light of two suns. At the very center of the city stood the great palace of Queen Vera. The palace was larger than any other building, its walls glowing with a faint silver light. It was a place of beauty, but also a place of pride and fear. Inside those shining halls, the alien nobles walked in robes of bright color, whispering and laughing as they passed. Among them walked a man who did not belong. His name was Darren, and he was human. His steps echoed against the smooth glass floor, and though he kept his head high, he could feel the eyes of the nobles watching him. Their voices were low, but he knew what they were saying. The queen keeps a human close. How strange. Does she not know humans are simple? Weak compared to us. Why does she let him walk here at all? Darren had heard it all before. He had saved the city once, when a great beast had broken through the city's outer walls. No alien warrior had been quick enough to stop it, but Darren had acted without hesitation. He had no palace armor, no special weapon, only his courage and a sharp mind. That day, he had stood between the beast and the palace gates, and through clever traps and fearless effort, he had turned the danger away. The queen had rewarded him with a place in her palace. But rewards did not mean respect. The nobles looked at him as if he were only a tool, a piece of iron kept in case of need. Even the queen herself, tall and strong with silver eyes, rarely spoke to him kindly. She called him when danger threatened, but in times of peace she passed him in silence. Darren did not complain. He was human, and humans had always been strangers on this world. He told himself he would prove his worth, not by words but by actions. Still, deep inside, he wished for more than cold glances. He wished for a place where he was not just a tool but a trusted hand. One evening, the palace was alive with sound. Musicians played instruments that shimmered like wind, and the nobles gathered in the grand hall. The queen sat on her throne of crystal, her robe flowing like liquid silver. She looked down on her court with eyes that never softened. Darren stood near the edge of the hall, silent as always, watching the nobles bow and laugh. Then a voice rose above the music. "Why does this human still walk among us?" A tall noble pointed toward Darren. "He has no blood of our kind. He has no right to stand before the queen." The music stopped. All eyes turned to Darren. For a moment, he felt the weight of the whole hall pressing down on him. The noble's voice rang again. "Perhaps he once did a service, but does that mean he belongs in the queen's palace? Should a simple outsider walk where even our own warriors kneel?" Queen Vera's silver eyes moved slowly to Darren. For a moment, he thought she might defend him. After all, he had saved her city. But instead, her voice came cold and sharp. "You speak true," she said. "This human has been allowed too close. His service is done, and his place is not here." Darren's chest grew tight. He opened his mouth, not to beg, but to remind her of his loyalty. Yet before he could speak, she raised her hand. "Darren of Earth," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "you are no longer welcome in my palace. Leave now, and do not return." The nobles gasped, then smiled with cruel delight. Some laughed softly behind jeweled hands. Darren stood frozen, his heart heavy but his face calm. Slowly, he bowed his head. "As you command, Queen Vera," he said quietly. He turned and walked through the great hall. Each step was heavy, but he did not let them see his pain. The doors opened before him, and the cold night air touched his face. Behind him, the music started again, as if nothing had happened. Outside the palace, the city stretched before him. The towers still shone, the streets still bustled, but everything looked different now. He was no longer a guardian of the palace. He was no longer the man who had saved the Queen's city. To the nobles, he was nothing. Yet as Darren walked into the streets, he did not feel only sorrow. Deep within, another feeling began to rise. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was something stronger: determination. The queen might have cast him out. The nobles might have laughed. But he knew his worth. He knew the truth of his courage. And though he walked alone now, he carried with him a quiet promise. One day, he would show them all that a human strength was more than they could see. That night, under the light of two suns fading into twilight, Darren left the palace behind. He walked not as a defeated man but as one beginning a new path. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, a storm was waiting, one that would test not only the queen's pride but the courage of a single human warrior. The gates of the palace closed behind Darren with a sound that echoed like thunder. For years, those gates had opened for him, welcoming him into the shining halls. Now they closed as if sealing away a part of his life forever. He stood for a moment on the wide steps, looking at the crystal towers that rose around him. The city was still bright, filled with music, lights, and voices. But for Darren, the city suddenly felt colder than ever. He had been cast out, and though he had walked away with calm steps, his heart was heavy with questions. He started walking down the long street that led away from the palace. The ground sparkled beneath his boots, for the streets were carved from smooth stone that caught the glow of the twin suns. People moved aside as he passed. Some whispered, some laughed quietly, and some only stared. "There goes the human. Did you hear? The queen threw him out. I knew he never belonged here." Darren kept his head high. He did not answer their words, though every sound reached his ears. He had grown used to whispers, but tonight they cut deeper. Still, he refused to show weakness. He would not let the crowd see him broken. As he walked, a group of children ran past him. They stopped for a moment, staring up at him with wide eyes. Unlike the nobles, the children had no scorn. One of them whispered, "Is it true you fought the beast at the gates?" Another asked, "Will you fight for us again?" Darren gave them a small smile. "If ever you need me, I will be there," he said. The children smiled back, but their parents quickly pulled them away, fearful of what others might think if they showed kindness to a human. Darren's smile faded, but his resolve grew stronger. He realized something important in that moment. The nobles could laugh, the queen could dismiss him, but the common people remembered. They had not forgotten who stood for them when danger had come. Perhaps they could not speak it aloud, but their eyes told him the truth they knew. By the time night covered the city, Darren had left the grand streets behind. The towers gave way to smaller houses, and the music of the palace faded into silence. He walked until the crystal walls of the city stood tall before him. The gates were guarded by alien soldiers in silver armor. One of them stepped forward. "Human, where do you go?" "Beyond the walls," Darren answered calmly. The guard looked at him with curiosity. "It is dangerous there. Few return once they leave." Darren nodded. "Then it is the right place for me." The guards did not stop him. The queen's order was clear: he was no longer part of the palace. They opened the gates, and Darren stepped out into the open lands beyond the shining city. The world outside was quiet. Tall trees with crystal-like leaves swayed in the wind, casting strange shadows across the ground. The air smelled different, fresh but heavy with the scent of unknown flowers. Strange lights flickered in the distance, perhaps insects, or perhaps something less harmless. Darren walked into the night with steady steps. For the first time in many years, he was truly alone. No palace walls around him. No guards at his side. No nobles watching him with sharp eyes. Yet with the loneliness came freedom. He breathed deeply, filling his chest with the cool night air. "If I am cast out," he whispered to himself, "then I will make my own path. I will not live in bitterness. I will prove my worth not to the queen, but to the world itself." As he walked further into the alien land, he began to notice something unusual. Small signs, easy to miss, but clear to him. The trees leaned as if something had pushed through them recently. The ground carried marks, like deep trails carved by many feet or claws. He bent down, running his hand across the soil. It was dry and broken, as though something heavy had passed through not long ago. His brow furrowed. He remembered the stories he had overheard in the palace, whispers of dangers beyond the city, threats that the nobles dismissed as wild tales. But here, the marks were real. Something was moving closer to the city, and no one inside the palace seemed to notice. He straightened and looked back. The crystal towers shone brightly behind him, proud and silent. Darren felt a twist in his chest. He had been cast out, yet he could not turn his heart away from the people inside those towers. They might mock him, but they were still living souls who did not deserve to fall to an unseen danger. I will not warn them yet, he thought. They would not listen. But I will learn. I will watch. And when the time comes, I will stand again. With that promise, Darren continued his walk into the strange lands. The night was filled with the sounds of creatures moving in the dark. Eyes glowed from the shadows, watching him as he passed. But he did not slow, and he did not fear. He was no longer a warrior of the palace. He was no longer a tool of the queen. But he was still human, and humans had always survived by their courage. The walk of exile was not an end. It was a beginning. And as Darren moved further from the city, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if guiding him toward a future that even the queen herself could not imagine. The gates of the palace closed behind Darren with a sound that echoed like thunder. For years, those gates had opened for him, welcoming him into the shining halls. Now they closed as if sealing away a part of his life forever. He stood for a moment on the wide steps, looking at the crystal towers that rose around him. The city was still bright, filled with music, lights, and voices. But for Darren, the city suddenly felt colder than ever. He had been cast out, and though he had walked away with calm steps, his heart was heavy with questions. He started walking down the long street that led away from the palace. The ground sparkled beneath his boots, for the streets were carved from smooth stone that caught the glow of the twin suns. People moved aside as he passed. Some whispered, some laughed quietly, and some only stared. There goes the human. Did you hear? The queen threw him out. I knew he never belonged here. Darren kept his head high. He did not answer their words, though every sound reached his ears. He had grown used to whispers, but tonight they cut deeper. Still, he refused to show weakness. He would not let the crowd see him broken. As he walked, a group of children ran past him. They stopped for a moment, staring up at him with wide eyes. Unlike the nobles, the children had no scorn. One of them whispered, "Is it true you fought the beast at the gates?" Another asked, "Will you fight for us again?" Darren gave them a small smile. "If ever you need me, I will be there," he said. The children smiled back, but their parents quickly pulled them away, fearful of what others might think if they showed kindness to a human. Darren's smile faded, but his resolve grew stronger. He realized something important in that moment. The nobles could laugh, the queen could dismiss him, but the common people remembered. They had not forgotten who stood for them when danger had come. Perhaps they could not speak it aloud, but their eyes told him the truth they knew. By the time night covered the city, Darren had left the grand streets behind. The towers gave way to smaller houses, and the music of the palace faded into silence. He walked until the crystal walls of the city stood tall before him. The gates were guarded by alien soldiers in silver armor. One of them stepped forward. "Human, where do you go?" "Beyond the walls," Darren answered calmly. The guard looked at him with curiosity. "It is dangerous there. Few return once they leave." Darren nodded. "Then it is the right place for me." The guards did not stop him. The queen's order was clear: he was no longer part of the palace. They opened the gates, and Darren stepped out into the open lands beyond the shining city. The world outside was quiet. Tall trees with crystal-like leaves swayed in the wind, casting strange shadows across the ground. The air smelled different, fresh but heavy with the scent of unknown flowers. Strange lights flickered in the distance, perhaps insects, or perhaps something less harmless. Darren walked into the night with steady steps. For the first time in many years, he was truly alone. No palace walls around him. No guards at his side. No nobles watching him with sharp eyes. Yet with the loneliness came freedom. He breathed deeply, filling his chest with the cool night air. "If I am cast out," he whispered to himself, "then I will make my own path. I will not live in bitterness. I will prove my worth not to the queen, but to the world itself." As he walked further into the alien land, he began to notice something unusual. Small signs, easy to miss, but clear to him. The trees leaned as if something had pushed through them recently. The ground carried marks, like deep trails carved by many feet or claws. He bent down, running his hand across the soil. It was dry and broken, as though something heavy had passed through not long ago. His brow furrowed. He remembered the stories he had overheard in the palace: whispers of dangers beyond the city, threats that the nobles dismissed as wild tales. But here, the marks were real. Something was moving closer to the city, and no one inside the palace seemed to notice. He straightened and looked back. The crystal towers shone brightly behind him, proud and silent. Darren felt a twist in his chest. He had been cast out, yet he could not turn his heart away from the people inside those towers. They might mock him, but they were still living souls who did not deserve to fall to an unseen danger. "I will not warn them yet," he thought. "They would not listen. But I will learn. I will watch. And when the time comes, I will stand again." With that promise, Darren continued his walk into the strange lands. The night was filled with the sounds of creatures moving in the dark. Eyes glowed from the shadows, watching him as he passed. But he did not slow, and he did not fear. He was no longer a warrior of the palace. He was no longer a tool of the queen. But he was still human, and humans had always survived by their courage. The walk of exile was not an end. It was a beginning. And as Darren moved further from the city, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if guiding him toward a future that even the queen herself could not imagine. The land outside the crystal city stretched wide and endless. Tall trees with silver leaves stood like silent guards, their branches moving gently in the alien wind. The ground was uneven, filled with strange stones that glowed faintly in the dark. Darren walked carefully, his eyes sharp, his steps steady. He had no map, no guide, yet he trusted his instincts. Days passed as he moved through valleys and across rivers that shone under the twin suns. At night, he slept under the stars, listening to the soft calls of unknown creatures. Loneliness was his only companion, but he carried it without fear. For the first time since leaving Earth, he felt free. No whispers, no cruel eyes, no cold queen above him. Just silence and the sound of his own heart. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue, Darren reached the edge of a wide cliff. Below it lay a field of broken rocks, and beyond them, the mouth of a cave. The cave opening was wide, dark, and deep, as if the land itself was breathing. Strange marks circled the entrance, carved into the stone long ago. Darren studied them carefully. They were not natural. They were symbols. He ran his hand across the rough stone. The shapes felt old, older than the city, older than the queen's palace. His mind filled with questions. Who had made them? What story did they tell? Something in the markings called to him, as if they wanted him to step inside. With slow steps, Darren entered the cave. At once, the air changed. It was cooler inside, heavy with the smell of dust and stone. The walls sparkled faintly, reflecting the little light that reached through the entrance. As he walked deeper, the cave grew darker, until he could see only by the faint glow of minerals in the rock. Then, he saw it. In the heart of the cave stood machines. Great silent shapes rested in the shadows, covered with dust and time. Their surfaces were smooth, not like the rough tools of the city. These were older, finer, and far more complex. Some looked like tall towers, others like wide tables filled with crystal panels. Strange lights flickered weakly across them, as if they had not fully died even after countless years. Darren stepped closer, his breath caught in his chest. He had seen machines on Earth, he had seen alien weapons in the palace, but nothing like this. These were not weapons. They were watchers, silent guardians waiting for someone to awaken them. He brushed away dust from one of the panels. Lines of light appeared, glowing faintly under his touch. Strange symbols formed across the surface, symbols like the ones carved outside. He could not read them, but he felt their meaning. This place had been built by a race older than the Queen's people, perhaps older than all known empires. One machine flickered more strongly, as if sensing his presence. Slowly, a round crystal at its center began to glow, projecting a faint image into the air. Darren stepped back in awe. The image showed stars. Thousands of stars scattered across the dark. Then, slowly, one star grew brighter, marked with a circle. Around it, dark shapes appeared, swarms of moving forms, spreading across space like a tide. The shapes moved closer and closer, until they covered the light of the star. Darren's heart beat faster. He did not need to know the alien language to understand. It was a warning. A warning of something coming. He stared at the swarm. The shapes were too many to count, dark and endless. Whatever they were moving toward this world. Darren placed his hand against the glowing panel. "Is this real?" he whispered, though he knew the machine could not answer him. His mind raced. If the warning was true, the Queen's city was in great danger. The palace, the nobles, even Queen Vera herself, they had no idea what was approaching. For a moment, he felt the urge to turn back, to run to the gates and tell them what he had seen. But then he remembered the laughter, the cold words, the way the Queen had cast him out without hesitation. Would they listen to him now? Would they even open the gates for him? No. They would only laugh again. Still, he could not ignore the truth. Whether the Queen believed him or not, the danger was real. If he did nothing, the swarm would come, and all would fall. Darren walked among the silent machines, studying them carefully. Some were broken, their surfaces cracked. Others still hummed faintly, waiting for someone to use them again. Perhaps he could. Perhaps a single human, alone and forgotten, could bring life back to these ancient tools. His hand tightened into a fist. He made a decision. "If they will not believe me," he said softly, "then I will prepare alone. And when the storm comes, I will stand ready." That night, Darren made the cave his shelter. He cleared the dust from the floor, lit a small fire, and sat among the silent machines. The cave no longer felt empty. It felt alive, as if the past itself was watching him, testing him, waiting to see what he would do. As he drifted into sleep, the image of the dark swarm stayed in his mind. He knew the Queen's palace might mock him forever, but he also knew this: when the true danger arrived, pride and titles would not matter. What mattered was courage. What mattered was action. And Darren was ready to act. Days passed inside the forgotten caves. Darren worked tirelessly, clearing dust from the ancient machines and studying their strange shapes. Though he could not read the alien symbols fully, he began to understand their patterns. Some panels showed maps of the skies, while others showed signs of energy and movement. He learned that these machines were watchers, built to warn of dangers that traveled between stars. The more he studied, the clearer the message became. The swarm was real, and it was moving closer each day. At night, Darren slept beside a small fire, his back resting against cold stone. But his dreams were uneasy. Again and again, he saw the swarm covering the stars, blocking out the light, sweeping across the sky like a flood. Each time he woke, his chest felt heavy. He knew he could not stay silent. The Queen City stood only a few days' walk from the caves. Its crystal towers shone proudly, but pride alone would not stop what was coming. Whether they trusted him or not, he had to try. So one morning, Darren set out from the caves. He carried nothing but a simple pack, a few notes he had drawn of the swarm, and the memory of the glowing warning. His path took him back across rivers and valleys until the crystal walls rose before him once more. At the gates, the silver-armored guards crossed their spears. "You again?" one of them asked. "The Queen cast you out." "I bring a warning," Darren said firmly. "A danger is coming. Let me speak to the council." The guards frowned but did not stop him. The Queen's laws said exiles could not return, yet they also knew Darren had once saved their city. Finally, with uneasy glances, they allowed him inside. The streets of the city felt the same as before, bright, crowded, alive with laughter, but Darren saw it differently now. He looked at the people and thought of how quickly their joy would vanish if the swarm arrived. His steps carried him straight to the palace gates. Inside the grand hall, the Queen sat high upon her throne, her silver eyes shining coldly. The nobles stood on either side, their robes glittering under the crystal light. Darren's entrance drew whispers at once. "The human returns. How dare he come back? Did we not see him leave in shame?" But Darren did not bow to their scorn. He stepped into the center of the hall and raised his voice. "Queen Vera, nobles of the court, hear me. I have found signs of a great danger. Beyond the city, in the caves of the old ones, I saw machines that still live. They showed me the sky. A swarm of creatures moves toward this world, countless and dark. If we do nothing, they will cover the stars and fall upon this land." The hall filled with murmurs. Some nobles laughed, others looked uneasy. One stepped forward and sneered. "Ancient machines. Old caves. You expect us to believe such tales? Perhaps the human has lost his mind in exile." Another said, "He only seeks to win his place back. Let him speak no more." Darren's eyes moved to the Queen. For a moment, he thought she might see the truth in his face. But her gaze was hard as crystal. "You were ordered to leave," she said coldly. "You disobey by returning. And now you speak of shadows and stories. Why should we believe you? You are only human. You are not of our kind." Darren's chest tightened, but he stood tall. "Believe me or not, the swarm will come. I have no wish for your throne, no wish for your palace. I speak only because I do not wish to see your people fall. Remember my words when the sky darkens." The Queen raised her hand. "Enough. Leave this hall at once. If you enter again, you will not leave so freely." The guards stepped forward. Darren looked at the Queen one last time. Her face was proud, unbending. He bowed his head slightly, not in surrender, but in quiet respect for the people she ruled. Then he turned and walked away. As the great doors closed behind him, the nobles' laughter echoed like sharp knives. Outside the palace, Darren's steps slowed. He had known they would not listen, yet a small part of him had hoped. Now he felt the truth: he was truly alone in this warning. But as he walked through the streets, something unexpected happened. A group of villagers stopped him. Their clothes were plain, their eyes wide with worry. "Is it true?" one of them whispered. "Did you really see danger in the caves?" Darren looked at them and saw no mockery, only fear. He nodded slowly. "It is true. The machines of the old ones do not lie. A storm is coming. The villagers exchanged nervous glances, but one of them said, "If the queen will not listen, then we will. Tell us what to do." Hope flickered in Daren's heart. The nobles might ignore him, but the people, the simple villagers who had no throne, no riches, still trusted him. They remembered the beast at the gates. They remembered who had stood for them before. He spoke quietly, so no guards would hear. "Meet me beyond the walls tomorrow. Bring what you can carry. Together, we will prepare. When the swarm comes, we must be ready, even if the palace is not." The villagers nodded, their eyes filled with both fear and trust. They slipped back into the crowd, leaving Daren alone once more. But now he did not feel abandoned. He felt the first spark of something greater. The queen had ignored his warning. The nobles had mocked him again. But the people had listened. And with them, Daren would begin to build the strength that the palace could not see. The swarm's roar echoed across the skies. From the high balcony of her palace, Queen Vera watched in silence. Her nobles stood around her, their faces pale, their proud voices lost in fear. The great city of crystal had always seemed unshakable, but now the towers themselves trembled as shadows passed over them. The queen's silver eyes narrowed. She had dismissed the human's words, yet the sight before her was exactly as he had warned. Dark creatures filled the sky, endless in number, sweeping down in waves. But it was not her soldiers holding them back, it was Daren. Far beyond the walls, she saw the caves glowing faintly with the light of the old machines. Fires burned along the hills, guiding villagers who fought with simple weapons. In the center of it all stood the human she had expelled. His voice carried even through the distance, strong and steady, as he led the people against the endless swarm. Vera's heart tightened. She was proud, always proud, but even her pride could not hide the truth. The human she had called unworthy was now the shield of her city. "Your Majesty," one noble stammered, breaking the silence. "What shall we do? The guards are panicking. The creatures are too many." Another cried, "We must close the gates. Lock the city. Let the storm pass." Vera turned sharply, her robe flowing like silver water. "Close the gates," she said coldly. "And leave him to stand alone? Leave the people outside to fall." The nobles looked at one another, unsure. Some lowered their eyes. None dared to answer. The queen returned her gaze to the horizon. Her thoughts were restless. She remembered the day Daren had saved her palace from the great beast. She remembered the calm in his eyes, the steady strength in his actions. She had thought him beneath her people, a tool for danger and nothing more. But now she saw clearly he had been more than that all along. Her voice grew soft, almost to herself. "I cast him out. Yet still he defends us." A silence followed her words. At last, the queen stood tall. "Gather the soldiers," she commanded. "We will not hide behind crystal walls. We will fight. Not as nobles, not as rulers, but as protectors of the city. And we will fight beside the human." The nobles gasped. Some looked shocked, others ashamed. Yet none dared oppose her order. At once, messengers were sent, and the sound of horns filled the air. Beyond the walls, the battle raged. Daren wiped dust from his face as he gave orders. The villagers followed bravely, their hands trembling yet strong. The swarm came in endless waves, but the traps, the old machines, and the people's courage held the creatures back. Then, suddenly, the gates of the city opened. Silver-armored soldiers marched out, their banners flying, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. At their head rode Queen Vera herself, her presence as commanding as the storm. The villagers froze in surprise, some fearful, some hopeful. Daren turned, his eyes meeting the queen's across the battlefield. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, without hesitation, she raised her voice. "People of the city. Today we stand not as nobles or commoners, not as alien or human. We stand as one. Follow the human's lead. He has seen the danger, he has faced it, and he has not faltered. Fight with him, and together we will drive the swarm from our skies. Her words rang clear and strong. The soldiers, once shaken, lifted their weapons with renewed spirit. The villagers cheered. Even the old machines seemed to hum louder, as if awakened by unity. Darren's chest filled with a mix of shock and respect. The queen who had once cast him out now stood beside him, not above him. He gave a short nod, then shouted new orders. The soldiers and villagers moved together, forming lines, holding traps, using the machine's strange sounds to weaken the swarm. The battle changed. Where before the people only defended, now they pushed forward. Courage flowed through them, rising higher with every moment. The swarm still roared, but the unity of the people struck harder. Darren fought with steady steps, guiding both villagers and soldiers. Queen Vera moved among her warriors, her silver robe shining as she struck at the flying creatures with precise skill. For the first time, she was not just a ruler watching from above, she was a leader among them. Together, they drove the creatures back wave after wave. Fires lit the night, horns called out across the fields, and the sound of voices shouting in unity filled the air. At last, as dawn broke over the land, the swarm began to thin. The endless tide slowed, then pulled back, retreating into the dark skies. The people cheered, their voices rising like thunder. For now, they had survived. When the noise faded, Darren stood at the edge of the battlefield, his chest rising with heavy breaths. The villagers gathered around him, their faces lit with pride. The soldiers, once doubtful, now looked at him with respect. Queen Vera approached slowly. Her silver eyes studied him, no longer cold but thoughtful. "You were right," she said softly. "I was blind, and I cast you out. Yet you stood for us when I would not. You saved not only the city, but also my pride from turning to shame." Darren said nothing at first. He only met her gaze with calm strength. Then, at last, he answered. "I did what was needed. Not for the palace, not for the throne, but for the people." The queen lowered her head slightly, a gesture rare for her kind. "Then perhaps it is time I learned from the human I once dismissed." Around them, the people cheered again, not for the queen alone, not for Darren alone, but for both of them, standing side by side. The battle had ended, but the air still carried the faint hum of the old machines and the smoke of burned traps. The villagers and soldiers gathered together, exhausted but alive. The skies had cleared, the suns shone once more, and the city of crystal gleamed in the morning light. For the first time in many days, peace felt possible. Darren stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking at the people he had led. Their faces were tired, but filled with gratitude. They had followed him, a human outsider, and together they had saved their city. He felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for them, the strength of ordinary people working as one. Queen Vera approached, her silver eyes softer now. She walked among the soldiers and villagers, nodding and speaking quietly to them, but when she reached Darren, she stopped. Silence fell around them. "You have done more than I ever imagined," she said. Her voice was calm, without pride or anger. "You saved the city, and you saved the people, even when I doubted you." Darren nodded slightly. "I only did what needed to be done. You doubted me, but that did not stop me from acting. You will not always see the dangers in time, and sometimes one human is all that stands between a people and disaster." The queen studied him, her face thoughtful. "You speak wisely. I cast you out once because I was proud. I thought my decisions alone would protect the city. But you have shown me that courage and wisdom are not born from titles or bloodlines, but from action and heart." Darren felt a small smile. "It is not for praise I act. It is for what is right. The people matter more than titles, more than pride. Vera nodded, and for the first time, her expression softened. Then you have a choice. You may return to the palace, be honored, and take a place among us as you deserve. Or, you may continue your own path, free of walls and crowns, guiding the people as you wish. Darren thought for a moment. The palace was grand, filled with comforts and privileges. Yet it had also been a place of judgment and cold eyes. He had walked away once, and now he understood that the life he wanted was not behind walls or beneath titles. I think my place is not inside the palace, he said finally. The people outside, the ones who have trusted me, who have fought with me, they are where I belong. The palace is safe now, thanks to them, but my path is with those who need guidance, not praise. Queen Vera's eyes widened slightly, then a faint smile appeared. So you choose freedom and responsibility over honor and comfort. A true human choice. Darren nodded. Yes. The city will stand because its people are brave. I only show them the way, and sometimes that is enough. The Queen studied him a moment longer, then stepped back. Very well. You will always have my respect, human. And the city will remember what you have done. Behind them, the villagers cheered quietly, and even the soldiers nodded in approval. The old machines hummed faintly, as if recognizing the decision of the human who had awakened them. As the suns climbed higher, Darren turned from the palace gates. The city's towers sparkled behind him, proud and bright, yet he walked toward the open lands. Beyond the walls lay rivers, forests, and the vast unknown. It was a world full of danger, mystery, and hope. And he would face it freely, not bound by titles, not restricted by pride, but guided by courage. Some villagers walked beside him, eager to continue learning from the human who had stood alone against impossible odds. Others returned to their homes, ready to tell the story of a human who saved a city that once rejected him. As Darren moved through the lands, he looked back once at the Crystal Palace. Queen Vera stood on her balcony, her silver eyes watching him, no longer with doubt, but with quiet admiration. He raised a hand in a small gesture of respect, and she nodded. The path ahead was long, filled with challenges and unseen dangers, but Darren felt ready. He had learned that courage was stronger than walls, that wisdom mattered more than pride, and that even one human could make a difference when acting with heart. And so he walked on, a human among strangers, yet leading the way for those who would follow. His choice surprised everyone not because it was unexpected, but because it was right. The city had been saved, the Queen had learned humility, and the villagers had discovered their own strength. But for Darren, the true victory was freedom, the freedom to act, to guide, and to show that humans, though small and alone, could change the fate of worlds. And somewhere in the distance, the old machines glowed faintly, waiting for the next challenge, ready to hum to life again at the command of a human who had proven that courage alone could protect an entire people.